Joe Simmons leaned against the wall of the nebula's edge bar, eyes constantly scanning the room. Old habits from his Marine days never quite left him. Even after 5 years working security on Orbital Station Unity, the station represented humanity's greatest achievement since joining the galactic community 10 years ago. It was meant to be a symbol of cooperation between Earth and the 17 alien species of the Galactic Union. Most days, it actually worked. Today was not looking like one of those days. Another round for the Centauri table, called Lisa Carter, from behind the bar. Her voice carried easily over the mix of human music and alien conversation filling the room. Lisa had a talent for remembering every customer's preference, whether they had 2 eyes or 8. Joe nodded, watching as she poured bright blue liquid into specially designed containers. The Centauri couldn't drink from normal glasses due to their unusual mouth structure. Lisa had found ways to serve every species that walked through her doors. "You know, for primitives, you humans make acceptable beverages," said a Centauri patron, its translucent skin glowing slightly under the bar lights. Lisa smiled. "High praise. I'll take it." In the corner booth, Z. Catal sat quietly observing. The Meridian xenanthropologist had been studying humans for months now. His species resembled tall, thin humanoids with silvery skin and large, dark eyes. He found humans endlessly fascinating, especially how they contradicted their official classification as a Class 3 aggressive species. Joe noticed Z.K. Tal making notes on his datapad and gave him a friendly nod. The Meridian had explained his research several times during quiet shifts. Xtal believed the Galactic Union had misunderstood human nature, focusing too much on Earth's violent history while ignoring how quickly humans had adapted to peaceful coexistence. The door to the bar slid open with a soft hiss. Joe straightened immediately as 6 large figures entered. Draxians. Their gray, armored skin and towering height made them impossible to miss. Draxians came from a high-gravity world and possessed twice the strength of an average human. They were also known throughout the galaxy for their superiority complex. "Station alert said a Draxian diplomatic team was arriving today," Lisa whispered as Joe moved closer to the bar. "Didn't expect them to visit us." The largest Draxian, wearing elaborate insignia that marked him as someone important, looked around. A bar with obvious disgust. His eyes narrowed when he spotted humans mixing with other species as equals. "I am Zarvash, special envoy of the Draxian hegemony," he announced loudly. "This establishment will clear a private section for my delegation." Immediately, the bar didn't go silent, but conversations quieted as patrons watched to see what would happen. Lisa wiped her hands on a towel and approached with a professional smile. "Welcome to the Nebula's Edge, Envoy Zarvash. I'm Lisa Carter, the owner. We don't reserve sections, but there are several open tables if your group would like to be seated." Zarvash looked down at her as if she were an insect. "Perhaps you misunderstand. I wasn't making a request." Joe moved closer, keeping his posture relaxed but ready. Captain Ella Martinez had briefed the security team about the Draxians yesterday. "Diplomatic courtesy, not special treatment," she had emphasized. "The station charter applies to everyone. Equally, our policy applies to all species," Lisa explained patiently. "We pride ourselves on treating everyone the same at the Nebula's Edge. It's why we've become a popular meeting place on the station." The smaller Draxians behind Zarvash rumbled what sounded like laughter. "The human thinks her rules apply." "To us," one said. Zarvash's face hardened. "Your species barely mastered space travel before being discovered. You were graciously allowed into the Galactic Union despite your primitive technology and violent tendencies. Now you presume to treat your betters as equals?" From his corner, Z.K. Tal watched intently, recording everything. This was precisely the type of interaction his research focused on, how humans handled species who viewed them as inferior, Joe stepped forward. Sir, I'm Joe Simmons, Station Security. Everyone on Unity receives equal treatment under the station charter, which all visiting delegations agree to follow. If you'd prefer different accommodations, I can direct you to private lounges in the diplomatic sector. Zarvash ignored Joe completely, speaking again to Lisa. Tell me, does your establishment serve proper Draxian spirits, or only the watered-down versions suitable for weaker species? Lisa's smile remained, though it tightened slightly. We carry authentic beverages for all 17 Union species, including Draxian fire brandy, imported directly from your homeworld. This seemed to surprise the Draxian slightly. He grunted what might have been approval and moved toward an open table, his entourage following. The tension in the room eased slightly as other patrons returned to their conversations. Nice handling, Joe said quietly to Lisa as she prepared drinks for the new arrivals. She shrugged. Not my first difficult customer. Won't be my last. But her eyes showed concern. Keep an eye on them, though. That one's looking for trouble. Joe nodded and resumed his post, watching as the Draxians loudly criticized everything, from the station design to the mixture of species present. Several human patrons were visibly annoyed, but kept their distance. Across the room, a young human engineer named Danny Walsh was celebrating his promotion with friends. Their laughter occasionally rose above the general noise, drawing irritated looks from the Draxian table. How do humans tolerate their own noise? Zarvash said loudly. Perhaps their hearing is as undeveloped as their minds. Joe noticed Danny's friends, putting calming hands on his shoulders. Good. The last thing they needed was someone taking the bait. Ixtal continued making notes. Most species would have already responded aggressively to such provocation. The humans were showing remarkable restraint, again contradicting their classification as inherently aggressive. Captain Ella Martinez entered the bar, immediately assessing the situation with experienced eyes. She spotted Joe and walked over. How are our guests behaving? She asked quietly. Testing boundaries, Joe replied. Nothing we can't handle. Ella nodded. The Draxian delegation is important for the new trade agreements. Try to avoid incidents, but don't let them cross any lines. Understood, Captain. As Ella left, Zarvash's voice rose again. It still amazes me that the Union allowed humans into civilized space. Their planet's history is nothing but warfare and destruction. The bar grew quieter as more patrons noticed the growing tension. Lisa exchanged concerned glances with Joe. Z. Catal leaned forward, his silver fingers poised above his data pad. The night was just beginning, and Joe had a feeling it was going to be a long one. The evening at Nebula's edge grew more tense with each passing minute. Zarvash and his Draxian companions became louder as they consumed more fire brandy. Their comments about humans grew increasingly insulting, just below the level that would justify security intervention. Joe Simmons watched carefully from his position near the bar. He caught Lisa's eye as she mixed drinks, and she gave a small shake of her head. Not yet. They both knew ejecting a diplomatic delegation would cause problems for Captain Martinez and the entire station. I've observed 43 separate insults directed at humans in the past hour. Z. Catal said quietly as he approached Joe. The Meridian researcher's silver skin gleamed under the bar lights. Yet not one human has responded with aggression. Fascinating. We're used to it, Joe replied, keeping his eyes on the Draxian table. Been dealing with this since first contact. Some species just need time to adjust to us. 10 years is substantial. Time, Z. Catal noted. The data suggests something beyond adjustment issues. There appears to be systematic prejudice against humans in the Galactic Union. Joe smiled slightly. Telling us what we already know. Z. Catal. Across the room, Danny Walsh stood up from his table. The young engineer had been celebrating his promotion with friends, and now he headed toward the bar for another round. His path took him past the Draxian table. Joe tensed. He'd seen this scenario play out before. Danny carefully navigated the narrow space between tables, clearly trying to avoid any contact with the Draxians. But Zarvash suddenly pushed his chair back, directly into Danny's path. The collision was minor, but Danny stumbled. "Sorry about that," he said quickly, regaining his balance. Zarvash rose to his full height, towering over the human. "You dare touch me, creature?" The bar fell silent. Danny raised his hands in a peaceful gesture. "No offense meant, sir. Just an accident." "Humans always claim accidents when caught showing disrespect," Zarvash said loudly. "Perhaps your species needs another lesson in proper behavior." Joe moved forward immediately, but not fast enough. Zarvash shoved Danny with enough force to send him flying backward. Danny crashed into a nearby table and fell to the floor, hitting his head with a sickening crack. "Danny!" Lisa vaulted over the bar and rushed to his side. Blood seeped from a cut on his forehead. Joe positioned himself between the injured human and the Draxians. "That's enough," he said firmly. "You violated station regulations with an unprovoked attack. I need to ask you to leave immediately." Zarvash laughed, a harsh grating sound. "Or what, human? Will you force me? Your species is physically inferior in every way." The other Draxians spread out, forming a semicircle around Joe. The message was clear: this wouldn't end peacefully. "See how fragile they are?" Zarvash addressed the bar at large. "One small push, and they break. Yet the Union classifies them as dangerous." He turned his attention back to Joe. "Move aside. Security human. Your presence is irrelevant." Joe didn't budge. "I won't ask again. Leave now, or I'll be forced to remove you." Kadal had retreated to a corner, recording everything. His research had never captured a direct confrontation like this. Most species avoided physical altercations with Draxians due to their superior strength. "You are either brave or stupid," Zarvash said, taking a step closer to Joe. "I suspect the latter." What happened next shocked everyone in the bar. Zarvash swung his massive fist directly at Joe's head, a blow that would have caused serious injury if it had connected. But it didn't. Joe sidestepped with surprising speed, using the Draxian's momentum against him. His marine combat training took over as he redirected Zarvash's arm, sending the larger alien stumbling forward. The other patrons scrambled away from the confrontation. Some headed for the exit, while others called station security on their communicators. Lisa continued tending to Danny, helping him to a safer corner. "Interesting," Zarvash said, recovering his balance. "Perhaps humans have some skills after all." He gestured to his companions. "Show this one why Draxians are the superior warriors in the galaxy." 2 Draxians moved toward Joe simultaneously. He backed up, keeping all opponents in view. Joe knew he couldn't match their strength, but he had other advantages. "Last warning," Joe said calmly. "This is a diplomatic incident now. Walk away before it gets worse." The Draxians ignored him, closing in from both sides. Joe waited until the last possible moment before moving. He ducked under a swinging arm and delivered a precise strike to a nerve cluster on the first Draxian's side, one of the few vulnerable points in their armor-like skin. The alien gasped in pain and stumbled. The second Draxian grabbed for Joe, but caught only air as the human rolled away. Joe came up behind him and used a security baton he pulled from his belt. The shock setting was high enough to momentarily stun the Draxian, who fell to one knee. Zarvash watched with growing rage. "Enough games," he roared, grabbing a heavy metal chair and hurling it toward Lisa and the injured Danny. Joe couldn't reach them in time, but someone else did. Frank Peters, A quiet cargo handler who had been drinking alone at the bar intercepted the chair mid-air. The impact knocked him backward, but he'd prevented it from hitting Lisa and Danny. "That's it," Lisa said, her patience finally gone. She grabbed something from under the bar, a modified pulse stunner that wasn't exactly regulation equipment. Seeing their leader being defied sparked fury in the remaining Draxians. They began grabbing and throwing anything they could reach. Bottles, chairs, tables. Patrons scattered, some taking cover, and others rushing for the doors. "Station security has been alerted," Z.K. Tal announced, still recording everything. "Estimated arrival time is 3 minutes." 3 minutes was a long time in a bar fight. Joe found himself facing Zarvash directly now, the massive Draxian having shoved tables aside to reach him. "Your species doesn't belong among your betters," Zarvash snarled. "We should have opposed your admission to the Union from the beginning." Joe didn't waste breath responding. He focused on survival, knowing he couldn't match the Draxian's raw power. Instead, he would need to rely on training, speed, and tactical thinking. Around them, chaos erupted as more humans in the bar finally joined the fight, not out of aggression, but to protect each other. Unlike the Draxians, they fought defensively, working to contain the aliens rather than harm them. From his corner, Z.K. Tal continued documenting everything. What he saw contradicted all official reports about human behavior. Despite being attacked, the humans were showing remarkable restraint. They weren't fighting to hurt the Draxians. They were fighting to protect each other. As station alarms began to sound, Zarvash lunged at Joe with murderous intent in his eyes. The real fight was just beginning. Zarvash charged at Joe like a freight train. The Draxian's massive fist swung toward Joe's head with enough force to shatter bone. Joe ducked under the blow and moved inside the alien's reach, landing 3 quick strikes to vulnerable points. On the Draxian's torso, the attacks would have dropped a human, but Zarvash barely flinched. "Your weak attacks amuse me," Zarvash growled, grabbing for Joe. Joe evaded again, knowing he couldn't let the stronger opponent catch him. Around them, the bar had descended into chaos. The 4 other Draxians were rampaging through the nebulas, Edge flipping tables and throwing chairs at anyone in their path. Lisa Carter had pulled a long metal bar from beneath the counter and was defending her position. "Nobody wrecks my bar," she shouted, swinging the makeshift weapon to keep a Draxian at bay. Beside her, Danny Walsh had regained consciousness and was helping another injured patron take cover. Captain Ella Martinez arrived at the entrance with 2 security officers. She assessed the situation quickly, her hand moving to the regulation stunner on her belt. But she hesitated. "This is a diplomatic incident now," she said to her officers. "We need to document everything before we intervene." The officers looked confused. "Captain, shouldn't we stop this?" "Just wait," Ella ordered, her eyes locked. On the scene before her, watch how the humans are fighting. Extal had noticed the same thing. The Meridian researcher was still recording from his position of relative safety. His large eyes widened as he observed the pattern of human behavior. "Remarkable," he murmured. "They're not attacking, they're containing." It was true. The humans in the bar had formed an organized defense despite never having trained together. Frank Peters, the cargo handler who had intercepted the chair, earlier, was now standing protectively in front of an injured Centauri. 2 human engineers had created a safe corridor to the door, helping non-combatants escape. A human medical technician was already treating injuries, making no distinction between human and alien patients. Most telling of all was how the humans fought. They weren't trying to hurt the Draxians. They were trying to stop them from hurting others. Joe continued his defensive battle with Zarvash, using the Draxian's greater size and weight against him. Each time Zarvash attacked, Joe redirected the force, causing the alien to crash into tables and walls. "Stand still and fight properly," Zarvash roared in frustration. "Not how it works," Joe replied calmly, sidestepping another charge. Across the room, one Draxian had cornered a human woman and a small Vexilian child equivalent. The alien raised a broken table leg like a club. Before he could swing it, Lisa vaulted over the bar and struck the back of his knee with her metal. Rod, the Draxian, stumbled, and Lisa positioned herself between him and his intended victims. "Get to the exit," she told the woman and child, never taking her eyes off the Draxian. The alien snarled and swung the makeshift club at Lisa. She ducked, but not quite fast enough. The edge caught her shoulder, and she cried out in pain. The Draxian moved in for another strike, but suddenly Frank was there, tackling the alien. From the side, "Go!" Frank shouted to Lisa. "I've got this one." Lisa hesitated only a moment before helping the woman and Vexilian child toward the exit. Her shoulder throbbed, but she ignored the pain. Sktal had moved to Captain Martinez's side at the entrance. "Are you seeing this?" he asked excitedly. "The humans are exhibiting classic protective bonding behaviors. They're forming defensive clusters around weaker individuals, including non-humans." "I see it," Ella confirmed. "That's why I'm letting this play out a bit longer. We need evidence." "Evidence of what?" asked one of her officers. "Of what humans really are," she replied. Back in the center of the bar, Joe was tiring. No matter how skilled he was, Zarvash's superior strength and endurance were taking their toll. A glancing blow caught Joe in the ribs, sending a spike of pain through his side. He stumbled backward, momentarily off balance. Zarvash seized the opportunity, lunging forward and grabbing Joe by the throat. He lifted the human off the ground, squeezing tightly. "This is the end of your defiance," Zarvash snarled, his face inches from Joe's. Joe couldn't breathe. Black spots danced before his eyes as he clawed at the Draxian's iron grip. His training hadn't prepared him for this level of raw strength. Suddenly, there was a loud crack, and Zarvash howled in pain. His grip loosened enough for Joe to break free and drop to the floor, gasping for air. Lisa stood behind the Draxian, her metal rod now bent from the force of her blow to the back of his head. "Nobody touches my security guard," she said fiercely. Zarvash turned on her with murder in his eyes. Before he could attack, Joe swept the alien's legs from behind. Zarvash crashed to the floor with enough force to crack the synthetic tiles. "Enough!" Captain Martinez's voice cut through the chaos. She and her security team had finally moved in, stunners drawn. "This ends now." The fighting paused as everyone became aware of the station's security presence. The Draxians looked ready to continue regardless, but Zarvash raised a hand to stop them. "This isn't over," he said, glaring at Joe and Lisa. "Your primitive species has committed an act of aggression against a diplomatic delegation. There will be consequences." Ella stepped forward. "Actually, Ambassador, our station's security systems record everything. I've been watching the feed. Your delegation clearly instigated this conflict. You would take their side?" Zarvash sneered. "Of course, human loyalty to humans." "It's not about loyalty," Ella replied. "It's about facts. And speaking of facts," she gestured to Z.K. Tal. "We have an independent witness who has been documenting the entire incident." Tull stepped forward, his silver skin gleaming under the emergency lights that had activated during the fight. "Indeed. I have comprehensive recordings of the entire encounter, including the 47 provocations that preceded the physical altercation." Zarvash's expression darkened. "The observations of lesser species are irrelevant. The Draxian hegemony will demand satisfaction for this insult." "They're welcome to review our evidence," Ella said firmly. "Now my medical team will treat all injuries, and then we'll sort this out properly." As the security team moved in to separate the combatants, Lisa made her way to Joe. He was sitting on the floor, one hand pressed to his ribs. "You okay?" she asked, wincing as she moved her injured shoulder. "Been better," Joe admitted. "But I've been worse, too." "How's Danny?" "He'll be fine." Already helping with the other injured, Lisa looked around at her destroyed bar and sighed. "Hell of a night," Joe managed to smile. "At least the drinks were good while they lasted." From across the room, Z.K. Tal watched the humans with growing fascination. Despite their injuries, they were already helping others, checking on friends, and even offering assistance to the injured Draxians. One human medical technician was treating a cut on a Draxian's arm, ignoring the alien's hostile glare. "Captain Martinez," Z.K. Tal said quietly, "I believe the Galactic Union's classification of humans requires significant revision." Ella nodded. "I've been saying that for years. This incident may provide the evidence needed to force that reconsideration." Tal continued, "What I observed here contradicts every official report on human behavior. As medical teams arrived and began treating the injured, Zarvash stood apart from the others, his eyes never leaving Joe. The look promised that this conflict was far from over. The bar brawl had ended, but its consequences were just beginning. 3 days after the bar fight, Joe Simmons stood outside the station's main conference room. His ribs were still tightly wrapped, and deep bruises marked his neck where Zarvash had grabbed him. The medical team had offered to speed his healing with advanced treatments, but Joe had declined. He wanted the Galactic Council representatives to see his injuries. "Nervous?" Lisa Carter appeared beside him. Her arm was in a sling, and a colorful bruise spread across her right cheek. "Not nervous," Joe replied. "Just ready for this to be over." The door slid open, and Captain Ella Martinez beckoned them inside. "They're ready for you." The conference room had been transformed into a formal hearing chamber. Representatives from 12 species sat in a semicircle, their vastly different physiologies requiring specialized seating arrangements. At the center sat Elder Kavan, a Tellurian whose species was known for their judicial fairness. Their crystalline skin reflected the room's lights in rainbow patterns. "Please be seated," Elder Kavan said, gesturing to 2 chairs positioned in front of the council. "This hearing will now commence." Joe and Lisa took their seats. On the other side of the room, Zarvash and 2 other Draxians glared at them. The Draxian ambassador appeared completely recovered from the fight, showing no visible injuries. "The purpose of this hearing," Kavan continued, "is to determine responsibility for the incident at the establishment known as Nebula's Edge, and to consider if any changes to station policy or Galactic Union classifications are warranted based on observed behaviors." Z.K. Tao entered and took a seat near the council. His research data had been submitted as evidence, and he would serve as an expert witness. "Ambassador Zarvash has filed a formal complaint against Orbital Station Unity," Kavan said. "He alleges that humans demonstrated unprovoked aggression against a diplomatic delegation, confirming their classification as a dangerous species. Captain Martinez has filed a counter-complaint, alleging that the Draxian delegation violated multiple station regulations and initiated the conflict." Zarvash rose to speak first. His voice boomed through the chamber. "Esteemed representatives, what occurred was a clear example of human violence. Their species has a documented history of warfare and aggression. They were admitted to the Galactic Union as a probationary measure, classified as a Class 3 aggressive species because of their volatile nature." He pointed accusingly at Joe. "This human attacked me without provocation when I was simply enjoying refreshments at a public establishment. Others joined him in this assault. The incident proves that humans cannot control their violent impulses and should be restricted from sensitive diplomatic areas." When Zarvash finished, Kevan turned to Joe. You may present your account. Joe stood slowly, wincing slightly at the pain in his ribs. I won't waste your time with long speeches. The station's security recordings show exactly what happened. Ambassador Zarvash and his delegation entered the nebula's edge and immediately began creating problems. They insulted humans repeatedly, demanded special treatment, and then physically attacked a human who accidentally bumped into them. Joe gestured to his injuries. I intervened as station security to protect our patrons. The ambassador attacked me with potentially lethal force. Other humans in the bar joined the fight only to protect those who couldn't protect themselves, including non-human patrons. Lisa spoke next, describing how the Draxians had escalated the situation and how the humans had focused on defense rather than offense. I've owned the nebula's edge for 3 years, she concluded. In that time, I've served every species in the Union without incident. This is the first bar fight we've ever had, and it was clearly instigated by the Draxian delegation. Elder. Kevan nodded. We will now review the security recordings. The room darkened as holographic projections displayed multiple angles of the bar fight. The council watched in silence as the events unfolded exactly as Joe and Lisa had described. When the recordings ended, the lights returned to normal. These recordings appear to support the human account, Kevan observed. However, Ambassador, Zarvash suggests that human aggressive tendencies provoked his delegation's response. To address this, we have asked researcher Z.K. Taw to present his findings. Z.K. Taw stepped forward, activating his own data projections. Esteemed representatives, I have been studying human behavior for 11 standard months. My research specifically examines the discrepancy between human classification as aggressive and their observed behaviors in daily interactions. The Meridian researcher displayed charts and statistics. Humans engage in fewer unprovoked conflicts than 7 other species currently classified as non-aggressive. Their protective instincts are among the strongest in the known galaxy, often extending beyond their own species. Extal showed footage from the bar fight, highlighting specific moments. Note how this human positions himself to shield a Vexillian child. Here, another human treats injuries on a Draxian, despite having been attacked by that same individual moments before. This pattern repeats throughout the conflict. Humans consistently prioritize protection over aggression. Interesting, said a Centauri representative. But what about their history of warfare? Their planet was engaged in constant conflict before they joined the Union. A valid question, Z. Katal replied. My research indicates that human conflicts primarily emerged from resource competition and ideological differences, not from inherent aggression. More importantly, humans have demonstrated the fastest cultural adaptation rate of any species upon joining the galactic community. The representatives murmured among themselves. Kevan turned to Captain Martinez. As station commander, what is your assessment? Ella stood. In my 5 years commanding this station, humans have been involved in fewer violent incidents than any other major species. They serve effectively in security roles precisely because they combine protective instincts with restraint. What we witnessed in the nebula's edge was not human aggression. It was human protection. Zarvash interrupted angrily. This is absurd. They attack a diplomatic delegation, and you praise them for it? The Draxian hegemony will not stand for this insult. Ambassador, Kavan said firmly, the evidence clearly shows your delegation initiated physical contact. The humans responded with proportional force to protect themselves and others. What are you suggesting? Zarvash demanded. I am suggesting, Kavan replied, that the Council should consider reclassifying humans based on this new evidence. Their behavior pattern is consistent with protective species, not aggressive ones. The chamber erupted in discussion. Several representatives appeared supportive while others seemed skeptical. The debate continued for nearly an hour before Kevan called for order. "We will adjourn to consider all evidence," the elder announced. "A decision will be rendered tomorrow. Until then, both delegations are confined to their quarters." As they left the chamber, Lisa nudged Joe. "That went better than expected." Joe nodded cautiously. "Maybe, but Zarvash doesn't seem like the type to accept defeat easily." Outside the conference room, Z.K. Tal approached them. "Your actions were most illuminating," the researcher said. "Regardless of the Council's decision, my research has definitively proven that humans have been misclassified." "Will that make a difference?" Lisa asked. "More than you might think," Z.K. Tal replied. "Classifications determine everything from trade opportunities to diplomatic standing. If humans are reclassified as a protective rather than aggressive species, it could change your position in the Galactic Union significantly." Joe glanced back at the conference room doors. "Let's hope the Council sees it that way." As they walked away, none of them noticed the shadowy figure following at a distance. Zarvash was not finished with this matter, not by a long shot. The next morning, Joe woke to the sound of his door chime. When he opened it, he found Captain Martinez standing in the corridor, her expression grave. "We have a problem," she said without preamble. "Sita was attacked last night. His research data was stolen." Joe was fully awake instantly. "Is he all right?" "He'll recover. Meridians are tougher than they look. But without his research, our case is weakened." Joe didn't need to ask who was responsible. "Zarvash," Ella nodded. "Almost certainly, but we can't prove it." "What does this mean for the hearing?" "It continues in 1 hour. I've already contacted Lisa." Ella's communicator buzzed. She checked it and frowned. "Security alert at the medical bay. I have to go." Joe dressed quickly and headed to the station's medical facility. When he arrived, he found chaos. Security officers were trying to contain a furious Zarvash, who was shouting demands at the medical staff. "What's happening?" Joe asked a nearby officer. "The Draxian ambassador claims someone attacked members of his delegation overnight. He's demanding immediate treatment and threatening to call in a Draxian warship." Joe spotted Lisa arriving from the other direction. She joined him, watching the scene unfold. "This is an outrage," Zarvash bellowed. "My security officer was drugged and beaten. This station is not safe for diplomatic personnel." The chief medical officer, Dr. Alan Red, remained calm in the face of the Draxian's rage. "Ambassador, we've examined your officer thoroughly. There are no signs of injury or drugging. His vital signs are completely normal." "Are you calling me a liar?" Zarvash demanded. "I'm stating medical facts," Dr. Reed replied evenly. Captain Martinez stepped between them. "Ambassador, these are serious accusations. We'll launch a full investigation immediately. However, the council hearing will proceed as scheduled." Zarvash stormed out, brushing past Joe and Lisa without acknowledging them. Lisa raised an eyebrow. "He's planning something," she said quietly. Joe nodded. "The question is what?" An hour later, they reconvened in the council chamber. The representatives took their seats, with Elder Kevan once again presiding. Aktal was present, a bandage visible on his silver head. "Before we begin," Zarvash announced, "I must inform the council that members of my delegation were attacked last night. This further proves the dangerous nature of humans." Kevan turned to Captain Martinez. "Is this true?" "My medical chief found no evidence of any attack," Ella replied. "However, what is true is that researcher Z.K. Tal was assaulted and his data stolen." The council murmured in concern. Kevan looked to Z.K. Tal. "Can you confirm this?" The Meridian researcher stood. "I was indeed attacked. However, the attacker underestimated Meridian redundancy practices." He held up a small data crystal, This is a complete backup of my research. Nothing was lost. Zarvash's face darkened with anger, but he quickly composed himself. These accusations are baseless. The Draxian hegemony rejects any suggestion of involvement. No one has accused the hegemony directly, Ambassador, Kavan observed. Your defensive response is noted. The council session proceeded, with additional evidence presented from both sides. Finally, Kavan called for a vote. Having reviewed all evidence, this council must determine two matters. First, responsibility for the incident at Nebula's Edge. Second, whether human classification within the Galactic Union requires revision. The representatives entered their votes privately. Kavan reviewed the results and nodded. On the first matter, this council finds that the Draxian delegation initiated the physical conflict through unprovoked assault on a human patron. Station security responded appropriately to protect civilians. Zarvash began to protest, but Kavan raised a hand for silence. On the second matter, this council has voted to revise human classification from Class 3 aggressive species to Class 2 protective species, effective immediately. The chamber fell silent. Then, slowly, several representatives began to nod in agreement. The reclassification was significant. It would change how humans were viewed throughout the galaxy. This is unacceptable. Zarvash rose to his feet. The Draxian hegemony will not recognize this decision. The vote is final, Ambassador, Kavan stated firmly. Furthermore, due to your delegation's actions, the Council recommends formal censure of the Draxian hegemony for diplomatic violations. Zarvash's face contorted with rage. He looked directly at Joe and Lisa. This isn't over, humans. Your kind will regret making an enemy of the Draxians. With that, he stormed out of the chamber, his delegation following behind. Kavan turned to Joe and Lisa. Your actions have brought important information to light. The Council thanks you for your testimony. As the session concluded, Joe, Lisa, and Captain Martinez gathered outside the chamber. Sktal joined them. His data crystal still clutched protectively. What happens now? Lisa asked. Now, Ella said with a small smile, things start to change. 6 weeks later, the Nebula's Edge reopened. Lisa had used the opportunity to expand and renovate. The new bar was larger, with reinforced furniture and a slightly more secure layout. Just in case. Joe stood at his usual post, watching the diverse crowd. Something was different now. The way the aliens interacted with humans had subtly shifted. There was more respect, less condescension. Quite a transformation, Z.K. Tal commented, joining Joe. The Meridian had become a regular at the bar, continuing his research with Lisa's blessing. Both the establishment and the social dynamics. People adapt, Joe replied. Even non-human people. Across the room, a Centauri was engaged in animated conversation with a human engineer. At another table, a Vexillian family was sharing a meal with human companions. Lisa approached with drinks. On the house. We're celebrating. What's the occasion? Joe asked. Just got the news, Lisa said, beaming. The Galactic Council has approved 5 new human colonies in previously restricted systems. And they've nominated a human representative for the Council's Security Committee. Who? Joe asked. Lisa grinned. You're looking at her. Captain Martinez recommended me. Said something about my protective instincts being valuable. Joe raised his glass to new beginnings. The door slid open, and a group of unfamiliar aliens entered. Tall and imposing, with ridge-like features, they surveyed the bar cautiously. Mavorians, Z.K. Tal whispered. They rarely interact with other species. Very isolated. The lead Mavorian approached the bar, where Lisa greeted them warmly. After a brief conversation, the alien turned to address the room. We have heard that this establishment is where species come to understand each other better, the Mavorian, announced. Our people wish to learn more about humans, especially since your reclassification. A path cleared as Joe walked forward. Welcome to the nebula's edge, he said, extending his hand in the human gesture of greeting. First round's on me. The Mavorian studied Joe's hand for a moment and carefully mimicked the gesture. We have heard stories of a bar fight that changed how the galaxy views humans. Is this true? Joe exchanged glances with Lisa and Z Katal. It's a long story, he said with a smile. Why don't you sit down and I'll tell you about it. As Joe led the Mavorians to a table, Extal made a final note in his ongoing research. Humans, not defined by their capacity for violence, but by their willingness to protect. Perhaps the most valuable trait any species can bring to our galactic community. Throughout the station, and slowly spreading across the galaxy, perceptions were changing. A simple bar brawl had forced aliens to rethink human nature, not as a danger to be feared, but as protectors to be valued. And it all started with one human refusing to back down when someone needed protection.